did Karmelo Anthony really confess to murdering Austin Metcalf when he said, "I did it"? No. I'm going to make the argument that no, legally, he did not confess to murder. It may look simple, but it's actually not simple. Hi, everybody. My name is Gray. Welcome to my brand spanking new channel, Counsel Gray. This channel is not even 24 hours old. It has not even taken its coat off. So thank you for joining me. I'd love it if you'd show the channel some love. If you like what you see here, don't be afraid to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification, and leave a comment. I will respond to all reasonable comments. Let's take a look. Karmelo and Hunter. First of all, let me just say, both of these boys have been talking entirely too much. So before I get into this, I'm sure you've heard of this case. This is the case where Karmelo Anthony, that you see on the left, stabbed another high school athlete, also 17 years old, Austin Metcalf, to death. Shortly thereafter, he was apprehended by the police a few yards away. He didn't get very far, and he had some things to say. I'm going to talk about Karmelo first, but then I'm going to get to Hunter because Hunter also spoke too much, right? Both of these boys have said too much. All right, so let's talk about Karmelo. He stabs a kid. There's an altercation of some sort. He stabs a kid. He gets a couple yards away, and he gets taken into custody. He decides that he's going to start talking and asking questions. Newsflash, the police, the cops are not your friends. Let me go to commercial break. PSA, parents, teach your children. Do not speak to cops. Period. End of story. Say nothing. Kids, wait for your lawyer. Call your parents. Do not talk to police. All you need to say is, I want to talk to a parent, and that's it. Silence. But does Karmelo do that? No. So what does he do? He lacks all discipline, and he starts running off at the mouth. Karmelo, when you're in handcuffs with your belly on the ground, that is not a friendly gesture. I'm not sure why you would think that the cops are your friends in that situation. What is he? Blah, blah, blah. I did it. Let's go on to Hunter because Hunter is also talking too much. He did his, however, to the media, thinking the media is your friend. Here's the problem with talking to the media too early. Any and everything you say to the media, it lasts forever. It will definitely come up in all of the relevant trials. And the reason I say all, because this will lead to both criminal and civil cases. There's going to be a slew of lawsuits in all directions. You mark my word on that. But here's the thing. Hunter starts talking, but Hunter, to me, sounded very coached. He sounded like he had been coached on how to put a spin on what happened. And the reason I say that is because he made a number of legally significant statements. The problem is that the very earliest witnesses that have come forward have all contradicted his statement. They have effectively dispensed with his version of what happened. So now both of these boys have created expensive situations that they now have to pay lawyers to get them out of at trial, to undo the impact of the lies that Hunter is now caught in, to undo the impact of the statements and the questions that Karmelo did when he should have been being quiet. There's a reason you are invited to remain silent. Now lawyers have to do a lot of extra work to try to undo that. Okay, so when you talk to the media too early, when you talk to the police, you think that you're setting the narrative, right? You think that you're smarter than the whole process. But really what you're doing is you're creating a mess that your lawyer has to get you out of, that you have to pay your lawyer to get you out of. All right, so what did Karmelo say? Karmelo said, I am not alleged. I did it. Good Lord. Boy, stop yapping. All right. But let's look at the significance, the legal significance of this statement. People are trying to say, well, the boy confessed to the murder on the scene. What else is there to talk about? But did he really confess? What is the legal significance of these words? All right. So this is the police report. This is where we learned of a lot of these words. So I'm going to set up the scene that led to this statement. This is one particular officer's statement about his version of what happened on the scene. So The scenario that he walked up on, this officer, he walked up to an officer Cortez who had Karmelo Anthony in custody. Karmelo was on the ground. He was seated on the sidewalk, and he was in handcuffs. So this officer says, as I approached Officer Cortez stated Anthony was the alleged suspect. Anthony then made a spontaneous statement and stated, I am not alleged, I did it. Okay, so good Lord, boy. The thing to do would have been to just say nothing, to just be quiet. The only two other options that he had was to admit that he had done it or deny that he had done it. He really couldn't deny it because, as we have learned, there were at least 30 and as many as 75 witnesses right there. Any one of them would have said, he's the guy who did it. In fact, 2 students directed the police to him, right? 2 students identified Karmelo Anthony and told the police, there, he's up there, right? He's up there, go find him. So there was already those 2 statements. Any of these other 75 would have said that he did it. So Karmelo could not have reasonably denied it. In fact, it's a good thing that he didn't deny it, because that would have required more work. Now he would have been a liar and all these kinds of things. But what did he do? There's 2 interpretations of this statement. I am not alleged, I did it. One is the sort of ego-based kid puffing his chest out, almost like, how dare you miscategorize me? I'm not alleged. I'm the guy you're looking for. I'm the guy who did this. That's your sort of ego-based way of looking at it. Or we could put the halo on his head and look at him as the saint, right? Saint Karmelo, very similar to when a mother comes in and says to her children, who ate all the cookies out of the cookie jar? And the good kid raises his hand and says, I ate the cookie, mommy. I'm sorry, I did it. Now, here's the thing. Without the audio of the statement, we can't really read into the tone of voice. All we have is the words on the page. But you better believe that audio is going to surface. Somebody's body cam captured something, right? So we're going to see. But here's the other problem with talking to the police. You give them too much to go on. You give them too much to use against you. People are not going to just assess your words. They're going to be assessing your tone of voice, and they're not going to do it in the way that's helpful to you, right? You've got a whole state machine designed and funded to paint a narrative, and they're going to use whatever you say, however you said it, they're going to use that against you. And then your poor defense attorney is going to be trying with limited resources to try to excuse away your tone of voice or your particular word choice or whatever it was. Just be disciplined enough to be quiet. Okay, so let's look at the statement. Is it a confession? Or is it just an admission to a fact? You guys, if you're enjoying this, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification, and leave a comment. I will respond to all reasonable comments. Is this a confession, or is this just an admission of fact? I would make the argument that this was a factual admission, not a legal confession. There's a difference between the two. What is the difference between admitting to a fact and confessing to a crime? Let's take a look at that. Okay, he admitted to a fact. He admitted to having done an act. He did not confess to having done a crime. In order for an act to be a crime, it has to be coupled with a required mindset. I'll say it again. In order for an act, in order for a stabbing to actually be a crime, it has to be coupled with a requisite mindset. Okay, so where does the requisite mindset come from, right? And requisite is just the word we use. There's a mindset required to find that an act was a criminal act. That comes from your state statute. Every statute, whether it's manslaughter, whether it's murder, whether it's armed robbery, whether it's burglary, whatever it is, it requires a mindset, right? With the intent to do something. Here's the problem. Karmelo admitted to the act of stabbing. He did not admit to any mindset. So that piece is still missing. Usually, the act or the actor is not known. This is your true crime TV show where the detectives are running around trying to figure out who did the thing, who cut the lady's neck, who did whatever. In this case, there was no question, right? We had 75 people who were up to 75, time will tell how many there were. There were up to 75 people who were willing to say or able to say that he did the act. So there was never a question about the act. Nobody can testify, nobody can say what his mindset was, whether or not his mindset matched the required mindset for the murder charge. Nobody can say that part. So what do we do when we don't have an admission of that? We look at other circumstances surrounding the act, right? So this is when you see, for example, the police are raiding the suspect's house. They're going through the suspect's computers, right? They're interviewing neighbors. They're reading emails. They're checking phone records. The reason they're doing that is because they're looking for information that they can use to infer mindset, to infer intent or premeditation or something like that, right? So that has to be established. And what ends up happening is the people who support the actor, the person who did the act, the people who support that person, they will minimize the mindset that the person must have had at the time. The haters of that person will assign the harshest, most egregious mindset because it can lead to the highest charge. All right, so let's look at this. In this formula, we don't have all the pieces, so he could not have confessed to murder. He admitted to the act of stabbing him. There is nothing about his mindset that certainly would lead to murder that he admitted to. And then whether or not it's a crime is a legal conclusion that is come to by the trier of fact, which is normally a jury. Sometimes it's a judge. Okay? And what that person is tasked with, right, the jury or the judge, depending on the type of case, they are tasked with deciding whether or not there was both an act and a mindset to make out this crime. It cannot be a confession to a crime prior to that because that's a legal conclusion. All right, so here's the problem. Here's where things get chaotic. This is where people are fighting on TikTok and YouTube and all these different places because we try to ascribe a mindset to the person. And like I said, supporters will minimize the mindset. Haters will enhance the mindset, right? It was so evil, so malicious, so egregious, so, so whatever. So for this reason, there was no confession to a crime. There was just an admission to an act. So is I did it really a confession? No. By itself, it is not a confession. It is admitting to a fact. All right, you guys, this is my first video. Thank you for standing by me. I'm not a professional YouTuber at this point, but don't blink because when I figure this out in the next month or two, this channel is going to be fire and I don't want you to miss it. So again, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification because I will be going live talking about this case and other cases. I'm a licensed attorney. I'll be talking about trial strategy. I'll be talking about these cases from the perspective of if I were given these facts, these witnesses, this evidence, and this jury, how I would handle them.